Hello, everyone. I'm Mystery,
And I am Bolton Mortimer, the Authenticator, here on YouTube, and we are the Duality of Man.
and today we're going to be talking about an issue that's really been in the news a lot lately, considering the recent rulings that have happened. But today we're going to talk about abortion. Um, do you want to start by saying where we stand on this particular issue?
I think that would be the sensible place to start. Where I'm standing is I think the subject matter itself is often framed wrong. We often frame it as either pro-life or pro-choice, and I don't think that's a particularly helpful framing because it lends itself to these quibblings over, well, it's not really murder if they're not at this level of gestation, da 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 da, da, and that's not really the point. The question should not be, is it murder or is it not murder? The question should be, as with most other cases where taking a life becomes unfortunately necessary, is this killing, is this murder justified? Like in war, we don't, or at least we shouldn't, um, quibble about, oh, this person was an enemy combatant and they were coming to shoot me, so I shot them first. But that's still murder. It's just circumstantially justified, or in cases of self defense, circumstantially justified. I really wish we had framed the abortion debate more along those terms because I find the quibbling over at this level of this level of gestation, it's fine to be disingenuous and pseudo intellectual quibbling. When the actual issue is not, is it murder, is it not murder? The question is it justified? As for my somewhat informed position on that whole rigmarole, I've mentioned on the stream before, back when we were talking about the duality of man and the law, um, that I think the cutoff should be when the fetus develops a nervous system capable of feeling pain, capable of processing pain, then after that point it is officially wrong. If we terminate the pregnancy before it has the chance to develop a nervous system capable of processing pain, then at the very least, beyond the metaphysical implications of it, of oh it's a soul, oh it's a life, oh this or that, at the very least in the most literal, practical, linear sense, it can't feel pain and therefore does not experience pain before it dies. Whereas if we do it at any point after it has a nervous system capable of feeling pain, then we have forced the termination of a life in excruciating pain. Imagine being a proto life form and your only experience of the world is excruciating pain and then death. That's philosophically, I think that should be avoided entirely. Um, as far as the legal angle of abortion, my thinking is kind of in line with, I guess, Razor Fist's approach, in that the problem with Roe versus Wade is it was basically a law created by judicial fiat, not by procedure or by any kind of legislative or executive oversight. It was just
I
the
agree.
the court says X, therefore we must do X. And the problem with that is that which can be unilaterally decided by the court can be unilaterally undecided by the court, and therein lies the problem. I think, as with gay marriage, and I'm speaking as a gay guy, it would have been smarter in both the cases of abortion and in the case of gay marriage if we had waited until two-thirds of the country was on board with some version of it and then created an abortion-based amendment or a equal marriage amendment. But we can't do that now because somebody got a trigger finger on the judicial system, and now here we are.
So, would you support a bill that would allow women to have abortion by choice or only via medical reasons?
It, See, again, my cutoff. doesn't really need to take that into account. My standard is if the fetus is capable of feeling pain, then we should do our darndest to avoid causing it pain for the exact same reason as or one of the reasons why I'm against circumcision. When a child is below the age of comprehension, let alone reason, we shouldn't do medically painful things to them, especially if anesthetic wouldn't work. Um, so I say if you as the mother, and we'll get into the other half of that in a minute because this is after all a men's rights show. Um, if you decide that you don't want the child at any point before it develops a nervous system capable of processing pain, then I would say you're wrong, but people have the freedom to be wrong so long as they're not hurting anybody else. So, you know, if you
Me
decide
personally,
before then, that's fine in my opinion, but I would rather nobody did it, but then again, we don't live in the world of utopias and hypotheticals. We live in the world where things actually need to happen. So, mm,
personally, I am pro-life with rare, and I mean very, very strict, rare exceptions.
yeah, and therein lies part of the problem of if you actually look at the reasons people who have been asked about it give for having an abortion, the number of cases where it is inarguably medically necessary is something like between 1.5 and 2% points, and I want to say like 30 to 45% are I was just I was just unready to have a child, or I just didn't want the child, or um I'm feeling that I couldn't sustain a child or something along those lines. It's very much because I don't want to, rather than
Yes,
because something horrible happened to me or because there was a medical complication or any of the I think even the most hardened pro-lifer is willing to excuse their principles in the sense of, you know, rape or sexual assault, incest, um, severe medical complications for mother or child. Um, yeah, those types of things, I don't think anyone could possibly have a meaningful quibble with. But that's between like 1.5 and 2% of all of the abortions that happen, and a lot of them are just you. And this is the other thing. Usually, the people who have abortions aren't even the working to lower middle class people who actually would have a financial hard time supporting a child. It's the middle class career people who, gosh darn it, just don't feel like bringing another child into the world. And I hesitate to be too um authoritarian about it because in the case of abortion, I'm of the mind that says it carries its own punishment, especially if you believe in evolution, because if you as a woman especially choose to yoink your genes out of the gene pool, then that sort of carries its own punishment. Um,
yeah, no,
it's one of those you
um,
play stupid games and win stupid prizes sort of situations. But that being said, I still would prefer a situation where we didn't do that because it's very stupid. You know, the old adage of how many historically significant geniuses or historically skilled, professionals of any given description have we lost out on because some mother just decided, gosh darn it, I don't want to.
I know. And just from a scientific standpoint, when a sperm and an egg meet and create a zygote, that is a human life. All human life that has ever existed has started out at that stage. It is a It's just you consider, oh, it's not a human being. Well, it is a human life. It is a stage in the life cycle of a human being.
Yeah, all other things being equal, unless there are severe medical complications, it will become a human. And after it becomes a human, you can put it up for adoption. You can, find another family to take care of it. You can do whatever you like after that point. You don't have to see it again if you don't want to, but um, at least give it the option of existing, please.
See, we have some comments. Ed Brewer is pro abortion up until crowning, as far as I'm concerned. It's not me doing it. I'm not a doctor or a woman or with a woman that would ever do such a thing. I just don't want to pay anything. If I got to pay, get rid of it. If I don't do what you want, it's the doctor, not the woman. You can have desire for an abortion all day, but if you don't actually get one, you having a kid.
Well, okay, but the problem with that reasoning is, unfortunately, there are some people who, without the medical access to an abortion, will go the coat hanger route, or the I'm just going to give it fetal alcohol syndrome so severe that it's going to die on its own accord route, or
Isn't that illegal?
any number. Not, I mean, okay, the thing with fetal alcohol syndrome, and this is one of the other gray areas here, is I think within, like, if it can be demonstrated to have been done purposefully, it should be illegal. I don't think it is, though. Um, that being said, if you are deliberately giving your child fetal alcohol syndrome, or you just can't restrain yourself from having a, waft of Pinot Grigio for 9 months, you kind of sicken me. Because, okay, I'm speaking as someone with a physical disability that was partially caused by being premature. I have spastic diaplegic cerebral palsy, and I was born, like, I think 6 weeks ahead of the actual due date that my mom was given. Um, so I do kind of have somewhat of a personal stake in this because my mom was 17 when she had me. Um, and I could easily see a situation where, if if things had shaken out just a little bit differently, I wouldn't be here. And therefore, I do have some kind of empathy and I'm not saying my mom would ever do that, as far as circumstances have ever permitted, because she's always been very, very happy being a mother, and that's, again, good for me. But I am saying that because I came into the world in a very unplanned fashion, especially considering my dad had cancer when he and my mom were together at the time. Um, and he had just gotten over it when I was conceived. Um, because of that, I can definitely see the argument for some people just shouldn't be parents. But then again, how many how many lives how many lives have we lost because we didn't even want to give it the chance? Because I probably, if my mom was slightly more self-centered, or if my dad um had died, or any number of other things had gone wrong, I could see a situation where I wasn't here, and I'm kind of mortified by that notion.
Well, I'm glad you are here, man. And I don't think that it's right because this is actually something that has come up where people are saying that we should be able to get abortion if we know that the baby is going to have some kind of disability because that will be a hardship on the family, which, in my opinion, is absolutely wrong. That's basically eugenics, in my opinion.
Well, okay, and I'll again play a little bit of devil's advocate, because I will say that one of the reasons I have so much respect for my mother is because I know full well that as a kid with cerebral palsy, I required more help than most other kids do. And there is a part of me that has always felt a little bit guilty over that. I've always felt that it was my responsibility to do whatever I could to make sure I wasn't a burden on anybody any more than I absolutely had to be, because I knew that inherently I required more help than most people. That being said, I hope to God that I had something resembling a positive or at least neutral impact on the world. And the other issue, the sort of impersonal philosophical issue, is who decides what a disability is and how do they decide it? Like for every developmentally challenged child um that's the result of these sorts of pregnancies that would actually be a drain on their loved ones or themselves or society or what have you. There's the occasional, autistic savant or high functioning person with sort of neurotypicalities. And yes, they're not normal, and they do, and being abnormal does occasionally have its negative consequences, but it also, it's one of those. I believe the old expression is that which is taken away with one hand can be given by the other, in the sense of a Rain Man style situation of someone is born severely autistic, but they have one skill that makes them, genius level, or so on and so forth. Or maybe it's just as simple as someone who looks at the world in a creative enough or atypical enough way that they can see something that other people who are more bound by the rules of normality don't see. And how many of those have we lost in the entirely avoidable um, choice-driven abortion thing?
You know, I believe that the reason that abortion has become such a major issue is because our society has really degenerated, morally speaking. I believe that in a more moral society where the kind of culture that we have, where women are actively encouraged to, be promiscuous, go out, have fun, and then do everything they can to escape the natural consequences of those actions. Um, you wouldn't be necessary to have abortion be as big as it is. And as we mentioned, that's one of the main reasons why women get abortions.
Well, and here's the second barrel, the fact that this is a men's rights show, and thus we have to bring this up. As much as it makes everyone uncomfortable, shouldn't the father have some say in this? Considering that it does take two to tango and it is 50% his DNA. Because what if the mother would prefer to be cavalier about it, but the father would very much like his child? Couldn't couldn't we just remove the fetus from the mother's womb, put it in a artificial womb or a incubator or test tube, and then wait the 9 months or what have you, and then the father keeps the child, the mother never has to see it again. Everything is fine.
Uh, I don't know if such technology exists, but I mean, let's say that the father wants a child and the mother doesn't. I mean, they could come to an agreement where the father helps support the mother for the 9 months of pregnancy. And then when the child is born, the father can take care of it and the mother can walk away if she wants to. Like in that situation where there is somebody who would be ready and willing to take care of the child, even if the mother doesn't want it, I see no reason to end that life. It's barbaric in my opinion.
And the only sort of devil's advocate idea that I can come up with for why we even allow this is because throughout most of human history, infant death was very, very, very common. And so maybe this is just the sort of evolutionary psychology, or maybe this is just the modern equivalent of us trying to counterbalance the fact that our medical standards have gotten so much higher that um, death in childbirth is almost unheard of now. And so maybe this is just society kind of intuitively counterbalancing that by selectively allowing that to occur by people's choice. And again, there is that part of my brain that goes, well, if you want to purposefully remove yourself from the gene pool, that's your business. It's stupid and it carries its own consequence. However, I sort of find it annoying that we don't know enough about genetics to even know what that baby would be like before we do that. And I feel like if we're gonna have this conversation about abortion, my thing is make all the choices you want, but um always at least have the option to make an informed choice. And the thing is, we just don't know enough about genetics to make informed choices about fetuses. Because again, for every horrifyingly crippled um, invalid that we might be spawning if we got rid of abortion, we might also be missing quite a few, Einsteins or Teslas or Chopins or what have you. Granted, there's also the possibility we could have missed out on a few Hitlers, but I don't think Hitlers are in that much short supply, because all it takes for a Hitler is to traumatize a child beyond all reason and then let them go on their merry way.
You mentioned being informed about your choices, and one of the things that I watch a lot of videos, and a lot of women don't realize is that getting abortions actually makes it more difficult
To
to get
conceive
pregnant and
later.
carry a child to term,
Yeah.
because it's basically causing damage to their insides
Yep.
by getting.
Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. You want to eject yourself from the gene pool, you eject yourself from the gene pool.
And I really want to go back to the choices that women make, because you know you see these women, they go out here, they mess with guys that they know they don't want to be messing around with long term. These are just guys that they
Yeah,
want to have
they
fun
just
with, and
they just
then
hit it and quit it, and then they're surprised when this goes horribly wrong. Wah, 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 wah.
I think that if we as a culture started moving away from abortion, it would basically force these people to have to make smarter choices. And I know that,
That was the most hilarious response I saw to the Roe v. Wade overturning, was a bunch of people, especially on TikTok, going, "Well, man, I hope you appreciated your free ride because promiscuity is over." And then it's like, but that men were not benefiting from your promiscuity. You were, and now
yeah,
now,
it
now
just
you're
just
forced to behave like a reasonable human being. Oh,
it's
the
just
horror!
it's just me as a conservative Christian, just Chad Yes side profile.
And even I'm looking at this from like a mostly indifferent like evolutionary standpoint. And it's like, shouldn't you have been more selective about your mate choices to begin with? That's sort of what evolution is like there for. The whole purpose of women having all this power in the mate selection department is so that they can select for the best genes and then make the best offspring. And you apparently just were living the high life and the sexually liberated life without any concern for creating a better generation than you left behind. That disturbs me, because like evolutionarily speaking, metaphysics aside, that is your one job. Your one job is find man with good genes to pass on to next generation and perpetuate evolution. And you apparently have just not been doing it at all.
I also think that it's going to help men as well be more selective about the one that they get involved with. Because a
Although
lot of
to
the
be
women
fair,
that are out
men
there
have
having
not.
fun, you definitely do not want to have a kid with.
Yeah, again, we said this I think in our very first show about dating and courtship. Do not stick it in crazy. You will regret this. Do not stick it in crazy. Do not ever. It is not worth it. I don't care how good she is in the sack. It's not worth it to make your child uh, evolutionarily defective just so you can have 5 seconds of feeling good.
We discussed the social side of this. Do you want to tackle the legal side of it regarding the actual decision?
Yeah, again, my 2 cents on it is that which can be unilaterally decided by the court can be unilaterally undecided by the court. It's almost as though we have procedures in place for reasons, and we shouldn't allow the courts themselves to just decide things by fiat.
And a lot of people who are upset by this, mainly from the left, they had ample opportunity, plenty of chances to actually codify this into law, and they did not take a single one.
Yep. They were just like, we made the abstract moral victory via the courts, and so that abstract moral victory will stand in the test of time. And then it's like, oh no, it didn't. Oh dear. Whoever could have seen this coming? Whoever could have told us this would happen? Meanwhile, everyone who knows anything about procedure or logic or even just precedent was just like, you should be capitalizing on this victory. You shouldn't just be letting it sit there and fester because it might come back to bite you in the ass.
And the thing is, the court is not even saying that women can't have abortions. What the court is saying is that we do not have the authority to
Yeah,
make
it's
this decision.
the purpose of a lot of the, especially in the Federalist Papers that were written by a lot of our founders, was to minimize federal centralization and authority as much as possible and leave it up to as small a scale as they could, i.e., the townships, the states, etc. Because they
And we screwed
know,
that up.
or they knew from breaking away from the British Empire back in the day, that centralizing power in the hands of a few for the sake of the hierarchy, not good or conducive to freedom or humanitarianism.
Or even effectiveness.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now it's going back to the states where it always should have been, and all this is going to mean is that you have to pay attention to stuff at the state issue, and people are going to essentially be able to live in the type of society that they want at the state
Yeah,
level.
and
If the
and
people of
this
that
was
state don't want abortion, they are going to elect officials that say ban abortion.
yeah. This is the thing that absolutely made me laugh hysterically like I was freaking Renfield for a bit. People are accusing this returning of the power to the states to be fascist, and I'm like, you literally are calling the opposite of a thing. You were calling the opposite of centralizing power fascist and authoritarian. Even though, by its very nature, this decision abdicates authority back to the people and decentralizes power and minimizes the state. It made my brain have an aneurysm the first time I saw someone call this decision fascist or authoritarian. I was like, that's literally the
They
opposite of
don't
what is
know what those
happening. But
words mean. They just fascist to them is just something that they don't agree with.
well, but it also happened with authoritarian. I'm like, okay, let me explain to you how this literally decentralizes authority. And and the and I have a acquaintance on my Facebook who I swear I keep on my Facebook just so that I can occasionally have arguments with him because it keeps my reasoning skills sharp. Because he is the strawman. He literally believes all of the establishment narratives, all of the social justice related narratives, everything that we typically stand against. And he was saying how this was so fascist and so authoritarian and da, 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 da. And I tried to explain to him that literally the opposite was happening. And his response to my saying, allowing the states to do it or allowing townships to do it is literally decentralizing the government and preventing authoritarianism, both in actuality and in the abstract, was yes, but if we give people the freedom to choose, then all the evil people will just win. And it occurred to me, and it's occurred to me about this particular guy many, many times, but he thinks that all authority must be legitimate and that no force against like norms or consensus could possibly be against authority or against like legitimacy. And I couldn't it got to the point where I couldn't argue with him anymore because all he was doing was trying to data spam me with all these articles about how awful this decision was. And when I tried to explain to him the data is not the issue, the way you're interpreting the data is the issue, I don't think he directly did, but several of his friends who were reading this argument we were having accused me of gaslighting him by trying to get him to examine the way he was interpreting the data instead of just focusing solely on the data itself. It was a whole thing, but
You know,
that was a complete sidebar. But it goes to show the way different worldviews can warp things out of proportion entirely.
speaking of being warped, I've seen a lot of people arguing about how this is the violation of their human rights. Abortion is not a human right, folks. It just isn't. A human right, at the very least, in my opinion, is something that you are capable of doing by your very nature as a human, like speaking, like going somewhere that you want to go, like uh,
Yeah.
defending yourself. Like
The
those are human rights. Abortion is not a human right.
the
You cannot
argument
abort your baby at will.
the argument is that it's a violation of bodily autonomy. However, and again, because this is a men's rights show, I have to point out that we still, at least in America and parts of other countries, consider circumcision a thing that doctors can recommend to their patients. We still consider men to be on the hook for child support or alimony, no matter how involuntary the child comes about. We like if the argument is my bodily autonomy, then I'm sorry to play the but men have it worse card here, but if the vector of comparison is bodily autonomy, there are dozens of ways in which men do not have that. Men don't have. There is no male equivalent to birth control. The closest thing we have is literally a thing that prevents birth control by making men more fertile, not less. Men do not have a reversible way of like the, vasectomies, to the best of my knowledge, aren't really reversible in the same way tubal ligations are. Men don't get a say in the issue of abortion itself while we're at it, and of course, and again, female genital mutilation has been outlawed in the civilized world for centuries, as well it should. It should have never been a thing to begin with, but circumcision still recommended by several medical professionals, and we never even fucking talk about it.
The thing about bodily autonomy is that we as a society already state that you do not have absolute bodily autonomy. If you did have absolute bodily autonomy, we wouldn't stop people from killing themselves.
Now, granted, I'm I'm of the opinion that I'm fine with the idea of physician assisted suicide as long as it's a cognizant choice. Um, because that is a choice that you are making that only affects you. So I say that's fine, especially if you're terminally ill, especially if you're in severe emotional or physical pain. That's far enough.
That's
But
that's an argument for another day. But I'm saying, like right now, as a society, like we do not allow people to just kill themselves.
mhm.
So why would this be any different in
Well,
the
it's
bodily
it's not
autonomy
e-
argument?
it's not even equivalent to that because if you kill yourself, you only directly harm yourself. The abortion issue, and again, this is another one of those we really shouldn't quibble about the definition of murder in this case because the issue isn't that it isn't murder, the issue is that that murder is or is not justified. It literally involves killing someone who is not you or something that is not you. And so far as I know, we still prosecute murder. And while we're here, here's an uncomfortable little canard for this. When pregnant women die, when pregnant women are murdered, we call it a double homicide. Why do we do that? Because we de facto, in the case of double homicide, see pregnant women as two individuals. We see that two lives have been taken in the case of double homicide. So if we legally see a pregnant woman who dies by someone else's hand as two people, one for the person herself and another for the baby, why is it that we can't even say the mother is making a choice to kill her child when abortion is involved? Do we consider femininity and womanhood so sacrosanct that when women are violated by someone else, pregnant women, we see it as two victims, but um when the woman decides to do it of her own volition, we don't even acknowledge there is any victim, because that is philosophically untenable and lopsided to a stupid degree.
Yeah, it just like I'm pretty sure that even the people who say that that's not a human life, I'm pretty sure that they are just lying to themselves.
Yeah, it again, this is why I insist on reframing the discussion, because it literally is just a pseudo-intellectual way to avoid cognitive dissonance. The question is not whether it is or is not murder. The question is that murder justified? And there are cases in which we consider murder to be justifiable. Again, enemy combatants, perfectly justifiable. Self-defense, perfectly justifiable. The question for the ages regarding the abortion issue is, in X case, with Y stipulations, is the murder of a fetus that would, in all likelihood, develop into a person of its own accord if left to its own devices, justifiable in the circumstance? And there are cases where, as we said, even the most conservative of conservatives would say, if it's incest, it's probably justifiable. If it's, the result of rape or sexual assault, probably justifiable. If, it will kill both mother and child, then probably justifiable. Like, there are cases where the answer to that is definitively and almost inarguably yes. But let's not act like we're having a different conversation than the conversation we're actually having by going, but it didn't meet my arbitrary standard for what constitutes a human life. Because if the pro-abortion side gets to do that, if they get to say, well, if it didn't reach this level of development, then it's not a human life, then the pro-lifers get to say life begins at conception, which I don't know to what extent I would entirely agree with that. I mean, in a de facto metaphysical sense, sure, but again, my standard is, can we remove this fetus without causing it pain? If the answer is yes, then while it's undesirable, I see no moral issue with it, other than the issue that will carry its own consequence, because again, evolution is a bitch sometimes.
Let's go back to Roe v. Wade. Now, when that decision was first made, there was a sort of social contract that was formed. You see, people mentioned this: abortion was supposed to be safe, legal, and rare.
Yeah,
That
even
that
Hillary
social
Clinton was
contract
forced to
was
go that route.
yeah, that social contract has been grossly violated.
Yep,
People are
because
now talking
now
about abortion
abortion
up
is
to the
even
point of
considered to
birth.
be a moral issue.
Like abortion up to the point of birth is just murder. Like at that point, you were just murdering a child.
Yeah, again, can it feel pain? Yes, then you are causing it pain, and therefore you should be told to fuck off.
My what I don't understand is why on earth would anybody even consider allowing it to go that far? You have to wait until the point of birth to decide that you.
Because the woman card is sacred is the main reason. if we don't let this mother kill her child, then we're inconveniencing the woman, and that might imply that we hate the woman, and we can't bring ourselves to believe that we hate the woman because every neurotypical human being on the planet is frankly overly gynocentric.
Like I remember people were upset about Texas's, I believe, what was it, 15-week abortion limit? That is more than 3 months. You do not need more than 3 months to make that freaking decision.
Okay, now the one thing I will give it is a lot of times people don't realize they're pregnant at first. It usually takes like
But
a
when
month or
women are
so
pregnant,
to
they don't have
even
a
know that you're
they don't
pregnant
have a
sometimes.
when women are pregnant, they don't have a period. I think that's a pretty telling sign.
Yeah, but there are false alarms and late periods and miscarriages and stuff all the time. So again, it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Even so, I don't think that women need more than 3 months. That's a third of the way through in order to make that decision. And not just that, but have you seen the attitude that people have about abortion at this point? Like, it has reached levels of psychosis. Like, I've seen videos of women who are celebrating their abortions, like have parties, cakes, making
Yeah,
freaking
they can they
TikTok
can
videos
they
about it. Like,
consider they
these
consider it a
people are
moral good
insane.
and a positive thing to have done. Yeah.
Like, I could understand and even have some sympathy for somebody who made this decision with great difficulty and had a heavy heart about it. But these people are just freaking nuts.
Yeah, and counterbalance that with the people who grieve even when they have a miscarriage. Like and again, getting personal again, and I'm sorry I had to get personal again, but this is actually something that happened in real life, so I have a point of reference for it. Um, my mom, before she had me, had a miscarriage, and she actually buried her miscarriage. Um, as in, my would have been older brother has a grave that I could go to if I wanted. And frankly, while both of these seem like strange extremes to some degree, I have more sympathy for that. The attitude of a miscarriage is a child I didn't get a chance to have than I ever will for abortion is sticking it to the patriarchy and is showing how liberated I am as a woman and feminist theory and and is a moral good like call both of these people a little bit batty if you like, but of the two, one of these is grieving the loss of a potential life, and one of these is frankly dancing on a metaphoric grave, knowingly, willfully, and deliberately, because they consider it a good thing that that child died. Gulp.
Yeah, I know a woman who had one kid but desperately wanted more, and she unfortunately had multiple miscarriages, and it was just so heartbreaking to hear her talk about them because she really, really wanted another child, and she was just in such despair at losing those two pregnancies. Um, Eventually, she did get pregnant again. I haven't talked to her in a while. I should see how she's doing, but yeah, like when a woman loses a child that they desperately want, like that's a tragedy because it was a life that could have been, had and celebrated and loved. That all that potential is now gone. But for people to, you know, celebrate the unnecessary destruction of this life and potential, it's just.
Well, it's
I don't want to
it's
use the word evil, but I find myself grasping for synonyms.
yeah, it's because in the like feminist moral framework such as it is, pregnancy and being homebound is considered a form of oppression to women. Therefore, the ultimate act of feminist liberation you can do, according to some strains of feminist theory, is abort your children if you have any, so that you will never be bound by the shackles, air quotes, of motherhood and or traditional femininity.
You know, the, I'm pretty sure that we've read a study that shows that women are less happier than their past generation counterparts.
Mayhaps the idea that being a mother is a bad thing might have something to do with it.
Yeah, and God, this issue just it just pisses me off so much. And they always frame it as if this decision was an attack against women, like women are being harmed by this or taking away their rights. Whereas the most women on most people on the pro life side are women, are like moms and stuff.
Yeah, that's the thing. Men are actually more susceptible to pro-choice arguments than women are, because men, by their very nature, want to serve as many women as possible. Because again, gynocentrism. Um, Whereas other women have the power to shame each other, and therefore more more women are pro-life than men because men want to just go along to get along and don't want to be considered um, hateful or harmful to their women. Whereas women can look at other women and go, how dare you make that choice? That choice makes you immoral. Because women don't have the kind of instinctive loyalty to other women that sadly enough men do. There have been studies that show that men actually have an out-group sociability preference, whereas um, women have an in-group sociability preference. You would think it would either be both groups would have an in-group preference because loyalty, or both groups would have an out-group preference because pair bonding. But no, in actuality, men prefer to spend time with women on balance rather than other men, and women also prefer to spend time with women rather than men on balance.
Well, yeah, because if a man is spending time with his friends, he's having fun. But if he's spending time with a girl, then hey, maybe he's got a shot. So, like like if I'm out with my friends and one of them happens to be the woman, he's saying, "Dude, I gotta go." I'm like, "Dude, just do whatever you gotta do."
Mm-hmm. And and also, while we're talking about the Roe v. Wade thing, can we talk about the fact that the person who um who is loosely known as Jane Roe admitted that she lied in the case and then later became a born again Christian out of the guilt for making Roe v. Wade nationwide practice?
Yeah. So, Jane Roe, as she was known, I believe she said that she was gang raped, um, and therefore was the reason why she wanted an abortion. Yeah, she came out years later and said that that was an outright fabrication.
Yeah, so not only is this egregious overuse of judicial power, not only did it forego any semblance of procedure or deference to the people in the country, not only does it not make any fucking legal sense whatsoever, but it's based on a lie, and a lie that was so egregious that the person who told said lie would spend the rest of her life guilt ridden over it.
Yeah, just I think that should have been the cause for it being overturned a long time ago. If it's
Oh,
built on
the
a
entire
lie.
premise of this case is fucked beyond all reason. Maybe we should get rid of it. Nah, no, it's fine. It's giving more power to women. We have to give more power to women because the power of the woman card compels you. Derp. But what about the woman who says she doesn't want that power? Must have internalized misogyny. Fuck her. But it's the same woman that we gave the power to do this in the first place. But she must have been turned against her own kind somehow. Ree. Derp.
You know, uh, one of our commentators called Tarot Destroyer said that, let me put it back up. Planned Parenthood promotes abortion relentlessly among blacks. 8% of Planned Parenthood, 60 efficient abortion mills are located in inner city areas with a black population above 50%. So, yeah, that's another thing. The origins of the organization Planned Parenthood that most people go to receive abortions was basically a form of eugenics um, created by a woman named Margaret Sanger to basically cull the black population.
Yeah, and it's not even explicitly the black population, it's the poor. She just couldn't tell the difference between the black and the poor because she was a first wave feminist, basically. And that's the other thing about feminism that nobody really likes to talk about. But you'll even see this among anti-feminists a lot of the first and second waves didn't do nothing wrong. It's only the third wave that went completely batshit doolally. As it happens, the first wave feminists in the form of the suffragettes were wealthy, aristocratic white women who wanted equality with their husbands and fathers and bollocks to any other variety of woman or any other variety of man. So much so that I believe it was Susan B. Anthony, although it might have been Anna Howard Shaw, but one of them said something to the effect of, if black men get the vote before women get the vote, then the oppression that black women will know under their husbands will be worse than any black man ever knew under the slave owner's lash.
I believe that was Susan B. Anthony.
Yeah.
But
And yes, I paraphrased that slightly, but that is the sentiment that she gave. If black men get the vote before women get the vote, then black women will have to fear for their lives under their husbands worse than the slave had to under the slave master.
I don't see what sense that could possibly make.
Because aristocratic white women are your betters, you see, and they are the ones who deserve equality.
God, and they have not changed.
Yeah.
But another aspect that I want to mention is that a lot of people in the United States mention that we should try to be more like Europe, follow the European model, like in terms of economics with their
And as
universal
it
health care.
happens,
Yeah, as it happens, Europe by far is more restrictive than most American states when it comes to
yeah,
abortion.
Europe largely agrees with Texas on this matter. It's funny how that works.
Yeah, like most European nations, I believe, limit abortion to 12 weeks, even more than Texas.
Yeah, it's between 12 and 15 in almost every European country,
Yeah,
up to and
so
including and I will generally and I will sit for the Nordic model because I'm one of those left-leaning people that genuinely does believe that we probably should be universalizing some variant or other of the Nordic model generally. But even in the sacrosanct Nordic countries that the left-wing people both like me and further left than me love, it's 15 weeks.
yeah, so these people they really need to become more progressive. They're living in barbaric times. They need to advance.
Yeah.
So now that it's back to the states, I know that a number of states had trigger laws that once Roe v. Wade was overturned, like abortion was banned or greatly restricted. I believe it was like Texas,
Yeah, because anyone
Louisiana.
with a brain could see this coming. Because again, that which lives solely on judicial fiat can die solely by judicial fiat.
So, what do you think about states like California, who are, I believe, are planning on making it up to the point of birth?
I mean, I'm not particularly surprised, especially because this is often the way that moralists of any kind um will operate. They will actually be calmer when they believe they have all the control they could ever need. But the very second they notice something that they can construe as a threat, they will push even harder and go even further on their moral framework than they otherwise would have. Because if if you believe that everyone automatically agrees with you, like much of the left did during the Obama years, for example, then you can freely offer the live and let live approach because you believe that everyone operates in the same framework. But the very second you know that other people with other frameworks exist, then we have to go even further into my moral framework because obviously those other people couldn't have rational or moral reasons for doing what they do. They must be this subhuman enemy I've invented for the sake of the straw man, and therefore we must go on a moral crusade again. And it's the same way the um TradCon evangelicals were back in the 50s relating to the Red Scare. You know, we have to be hyper traditionalistic because otherwise we'll, our children will get subverted by the evil red minister, or they'll get reefer madness and become a bunch of layabouts and so on and so forth.
I mean, have you seen modern universities?
I mean, okay, but that was not a organic response. That was because the pendulum swung all the way the other way, and now the moral authoritarians are the Karens rather than the Helen Lovejoys. Just because the dystopia of the Karens is very similar to what the Helen Lovejoys were afraid of doesn't mean that without the Helen Lovejoys we wind up with the Karens. It means fuck both of these people. Fuck the Tradcon family values types and the social justice warriors. Neither of them are constructive to anything. Most people cluster around the centrist, sort of just nonchalant, indifferent, who the fuck cares, do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anybody approach. And frankly, that is my golden mean here. Screw all of the moralists and the moral authoritarians. Your strict morality actually causes the very problems that it professes to fix and makes everyone miserable in the meantime. Both of you can fuck off, as far as I'm concerned.
I personally lean more towards TradCon family values, but I don't go like super far with it. You know me. And there are a lot of
Yeah,
issues that I'm progressive on. The problem is that I believe with progression with freaking breaks.
yeah. It, and that's the difference between somebody like you who is in favor of a moral system but allows for others to exist and a moral authoritarian or a social justice warrior as the modern term goes. And that's the thing. Social justice warrior isn't something that just applies to the left. I apply social justice warrior to the right just as much because that's what I refer to people like Jack Thompson or Frederick Wortham or Gavin McGinnis as his famous "men should be building tables, not playing video games" fucking video. Um, because I worry about either side gaining too much steam. Because frankly, people don't need external morality to know how to be good people. But external morality can give people reasons to fuck up. I.e., if you tell people there are subhuman evil people out there who do awful things, then they're going to be on guard for subhuman evil people who do awful things. And very often that's going to result in strawmanning the fuck out of everyone who doesn't think like them. And what happens is you wind up with two or more teams both seeing the other as subhuman and evil. The tradcons are screaming, "Re everyone to the left of me must be a communist," and the social justice warrior types going, "Re everyone to the right of me wants to live in Pleasantville by gunpoint," and around we go. And meanwhile, you have people in the middle just going, "No, we don't want either of these things." And frankly, you both seem to be dehumanizing your enemies for stupid reasons. We could just all treat people like people and treat people's like intuitive morality as fine and everything would be good. Like we could be populist and libertarian and non-interventionist and humanist rather than moralistic, and we would be not in a utopia because utopias are impossible, but in the best possible world like we almost had in the 90s, were it not for the very same social justice warrior types taking over in absence of the tradcons.
Okay, so I remember reading recently that Joe Biden recently signed an executive order regarding abortion. Let me just pull it up so I could read a bit. Joe Biden signed an executive order Friday to ensure access to abortion 2 weeks after the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. The executive order vows to ensure the safety of patients, providers, and third parties. I'm assuming by third parties he means the children. Obviously not, considering that it's talking about abortion, who have abortions or provide abortion services. Additionally, the order calls on the Department of Health and Human Services to submit a report in 30 days detailing steps to take that can protect medication abortion, expand access to emergency contraceptives, and increase education about reproductive health care services. Now, I don't think the federal government should be getting involved in this. This really should be a state's issue, in my opinion.
They have learned nothing from this entire Supreme Court fiasco. Nothing at all. The entire crux of the judicial backbiting that resulted from this whole rigmarole was they used too much fiat power from the judicial system to force the issue when the issue didn't need to be forced. And their only response to paying the consequences of their own actions is, we just need to try harder with a different kind of power. This time we'll go at it using the executive branch, which is even less tenable than the judicial area. Okay, guys, gonna spell this out for you really, really nice and neat. The problem with the Roe v. Wade thing was not abortion itself. It was trying to force, by fiat, using one vector of the government's power, to hogtie all of the rest of it. If you want an abortion amendment, which I'm fine existing if it exists, if you want an abortion amendment, then you need to go about it in the proper procedure and wait for everyone to be on a similar page, or find a meaningful compromise somewhere in the fucking middle. That is the only way you're going to get this. Because, once again, that which is accomplished by unilateral authority can be undone by unilateral authority. You can't just swap executive for judicial and act like it's a completely different thing now. And incidentally, even if we could get unilateral authority to matter in this case, which we can't, judicial authority is actually more tenable than executive authority by its very nature, because that is how the government was set up, for the very same reason of, we don't like fucking dictators. So of the three branches of government, the three branches of the US government, the executive, the judicial, and the legislature, the executive is the weakest and the easiest to overturn, specifically to prevent this kind of thing. So if you think that this is a meaningful thing you just did, you A, have learned nothing, and B, you're now standing on even shakier ground than you were previously. Just let it happen organically and try to pass an abortion amendment. And I will say this to all of my LGBT friends, speaking as a gay guy myself. It was wrong for us to force through gay marriage using the same judicial fiat. We should have done what the civil rights movement did and what the voting rights movement did, and waited for an actual goddamn amendment, which would have involved 2/3 of the country coming to some kind of meaningful compromise. That would have been a preferable situation, because that is actually capable of standing. Judicial fiat does not work. This is a constitutional democratic republic that we live in for very good goddamn reason. Here endeth the rant for now. Sorry.
Yeah. Personally, I can see the argument for the decision regarding gay marriage from the judiciary. Like, if the government is going to recognize this contract between two individuals, it can't place a restriction on it from a subset of citizens. But I feel like it should have been legislated just so it would make it more secure. And I want to bring up a topic that I had just been ruminating on. It's you know, one of the arguments from people on the pro-abortion side is that the pro-life side wants the babies to be born, but then they don't care about them afterwards or what happens to them afterwards. Well, two I have two responses to that. One, someone's child is primarily their responsibility. One thing, and two, this is the same side that was destroying crisis pregnancy centers. What after the decision was leaked, the same centers that women actually go to when they want help during and after pregnancy.
Well, but that's the really disturbing thing in this case, though. That whole argument of they don't care about what happens after they're born, that implies some very scary and not exactly humane things about the potential mothers in question. Because what they're basically saying there is, if you force us to have children we don't want, we'll just abuse them and make them miserable and treat them like shit, which will do nothing but create a generation of goddamn sociopaths. And this is why I try not to get moralistic about it, because honestly, again, if you choose to eject yourself from the gene pool that is your doing, and I much rather prefer a child that doesn't exist to a child that grows up into a violent sociopath because his mother abused him because she didn't want him in the first place. But my solution there would be, frankly, let's rehome these children. Let's actually give them to people who would want children, because frankly, the degree to which we let women in particular get away with child abuse is disturbing and
That's
is responsible for 90% of all the social problems that we have as a civilization.
and one thing I think it should be made easier for people to adopt children because there are a lot of couples out there that do generally want to adopt a child, but for one reason or another are unable to. And I
Are
think,
prevented from, yeah.
yeah, I think it's because adoption has kind of become a racket. Like there's a lot of money
Yeah,
being thrown around in pursuit of adoption, and a lot of people are do not want to give that up. Like people
they're
pay
they're
thousands
basic
of
they're
dollars to
basically
try to adopt a
doing what Miss Hannigan does in Annie. They're taking a bunch of children in and then treating them like shit and then reaping the benefits of it.
yeah, people are often you know barred from adoption because they may have like one or two things in their past that the government doesn't like. Meanwhile, people are having kids who like are criminals or addicted to illicit substances or just the absolute worst people you could imagine. But someone who had made a mistake but has turned their life around and is doing a lot better once to adopt a child is you know
Yeah,
unable to.
and here's another interesting little tidbit. Much in the same way as when we were having our talk about men and suicide a couple of shows ago, um, and talking about the psychology profession being lousy with social justice and feminist ideology, the social work profession is also lousy with feminist and or social justice ideology. So very often, the reason why certain people um, are prevented from adopting or prevented from keeping foster children is not because they're actually doing any harm to the children, but because they run afoul of the orthodoxy. And in fact, I know of one particular case, and this is someone I know personally. I won't go directly into his personal stuff because he wouldn't want me to. But he has an ex-girlfriend who is a classic case of borderline personality disorder. And she is a social worker who works for Child Protective Services. And she
That's safe.
uses feminist ideology and the authority of her knowledge as a social worker to railroad this person that I know and prevent him from seeing a child they had together. Because basically she wants a almost Munchausen by proxy level of control over him, and she doesn't trust the father in this case because he and she separated on negative terms, and she is now using their child as a uh, bargaining chip to gain power over him and to railroad him using the family courts and the bureaucracy.
That's
And
a
it is
shame.
harmful to the child as well while we're talking about it, but that's not here nor there.
Another argument, I think you mentioned this before, that people say that when they're pro abortion, like, well, I can't take care of this child. Like, do you want it to grow up in like a foster system? Like, I know there are a lot of problems with the American foster care system, but it's not that bad. I know,
Existence is
I,
preferable to non-existence generally.
yeah,
Again,
I know from a personal,
speaking as a kid who was the son of a woman who was 17 when he was born, and also who also has a disability. Like, I would prefer to exist than not. So there.
this is personal for me because my mother was actually in the foster care system. She grew up as a foster child, and she is a smart, caring woman and a great mom. She was a professional journalist back before journalism went to hell.
Before journalism was no more, before it was killed from the inside out.
Yeah, so like people who grew up in the foster system, it can be a rough start, but they can lead really good lives. Like my
Yeah.
mom was a great mom and a great grandmother too.
Mm-hmm. So now, granted, yes, sometimes adversity breeds trauma, but other times, in fact, probably more common, adversity breeds um, strength and perseverance. Like those who are exposed to the world very early on and who have to deal with it to some degree, whether it's through, their lifestyle, their parenting, or their parents' lives, or you know, just life kind of shitting on them repeatedly. Sometimes that leads to trauma, yes, but other times it leads to people becoming accustomed to the real score of the world and rising to the adversity rather than being destroyed by it. But neither of these things can happen if the person doesn't have a chance to live in the first place.
Yeah, it just seems to me that well, I feel like we are going in the right direction. There are people uh, who are not going to give this up without a fight. I know who was it? I believe Elizabeth Warren, who said that who basically said that they need to fight to protect their abortion rights, which again, it's not a right, but that's another thing that really pisses me off because it seems like these people want to force the way they want to live on everybody else in the country. Like I've seen a lot of people on
Yeah,
social media who live in like
it's
California or Washington State, who say they're upset about their abortion rights being taken away. You live in some of the most liberal states in the country.
yeah.
Your
There is no
abortion
way in
rights
hell
are
anyone
not
in
being taken
California
away.
is going to go, we need to remove all of the abortion clinics. Never. Not not in this lifetime, no.
Like it's like they're
but
trying to
more to the
force
point,
their ideals onto the rest of the nation, which is
yeah,
wrong.
and also more to the point, if we consider abortion to be a right as an extension of bodily autonomy, then it is yet another right that men do not have. A proposed right, a proposed thing that is considered necessary for human existence to flourish, that men do not and never have had. Never. Never in history could a man insist on his wife not getting pregnant or not staying pregnant. Never.
No, men could even be screwed if they're sexually assaulted. I remember what was it, a case where a man was rendered unconscious and then had his, I believe, prostate stimulated so that he could ejaculate. Then the sperm was taken and woman used it to impregnate herself. Like, and the man was still on the hook for that child.
Yeah. And this is the other thing. If all of these institutional privileges that we offer to mostly women can meaningfully be called rights, which is debatable, but if, for the sake of the thought experiment, if abortion is considered a incontrovertible right for women, if bodily autonomy is considered an incontrovertible right for women, if, housing is considered an incontrovertible right for women, yada yada yada. If all of these privileges, these institutional privileges that we offer to women are considered incontrovertible human rights, then we're going to have to talk about the fact that for 49% of our population, namely the male half, these allegedly incontrovertible human rights have been denied and are continuing to be denied throughout all of human history.
Well, do you have anything? I've said pretty much all I've had to say about this topic. Do you have anything else that you want to say?
If you want abortion on a universal federal level, advocate for an abortion amendment. Do what they did with the Voting Rights Amendment and the freeing of the slaves and so on and so, like, do what your predecessors, for better or for worse, did, and go through the appropriate constitutional channels to do it. That way it can't just be struck down by fiat. Or if you want to do it the cheap and nasty way, if you want instant gratification, then be prepared for it to be undone the very next second someone who disagrees with you is in power. Because if you live by executive or judicial fiat, you will die by executive or judicial fiat. There are procedures in place for a reason, and it is specifically to create lasting changes as and when society needs them. If you want these to be lasting changes, you need to do it the proper procedural way or stop fucking complaining. And if all of these things are considered incontrovertible human rights, then you might want to explain the fuck to me why men can't have any of these incontrovertible human rights. Or
First,
are you genuinely going to say that only women are human? Because it really, really fucking feels like we might be getting there sooner rather than later. May you be condemned to live
personally,
in
I
interesting
feel that
times.
I feel that a federal legislation on abortion would be a gross overreach. Um, you don't want to shove the way that you want to live down the throats of other people in states that you're never going to live in. What you should do, in my opinion, is try to legislate it at the state level if that's what you want. Make the effort, campaign in your state, vote for people, and help to get elected representatives who will do what you want them to do regarding this issue. So I
And then
wouldn't agree with
and
your
then
opinion.
when 2/3 of the country is on a similar page with it, then we can have a conversation about amendments, like it's supposed to be.
So I think I'm going to end this here. Uh, I've been Mystery.
I have been Dalton Mortimer, the Authenticator, and we have been the Duality of Men. Cheers, everyone.